In 2018, a genetics team at Harvard University extracted DNA from some of the oldest human remains ever tested in Mesopotamia. Their mission was simple. Compare Sumerian DNA against every known population database on the planet, modern and ancient, covering over 400 civilizations. They expected to find a match, a parent population, a migration route, something. Instead, the markers lined up with exactly 0 of them. No match, no connection, no ancestors. Then in 2020, a second independent lab, the Max Planck Institute in Leipzig, ran the same comparison with improved methods. Same result. The Sumerians don't match anyone. Not their neighbors, not their descendants, not a single population on Earth. But before we follow where that data leads, you need to understand something that archaeologists have been avoiding for over a century. The Sumerians appeared out of nowhere, and the deeper science digs, the stranger it gets. Every major civilization in the ancient world has a traceable origin. The Egyptians came from North African herding groups who moved into the Nile Valley around 5000 BC. The Harappans of the Indus Valley traced to Iranian plateau populations. Chinese civilizations connect to East Asian founder groups around the Yellow River. These aren't guesses. They're conclusions backed by decades of archaeological records, language tracing, and now ancient DNA. The Sumerians have none of that. Around 4500 BCE, southern Mesopotamia was occupied by a group called the Ubaid culture. Simple farming communities, painted pottery, mud brick houses, no signs of centralized leadership, no writing, no advanced mathematics. Then within what appears to be a single generation, everything changes. Writing appears not in a crude form, but as a fully developed system capable of recording complex trade deals, legal rulings, and star charts. Massive temple complexes rise, requiring organized work crews of thousands. Advanced mathematics built on a base 60 system so precise, we still use it for measuring time and angles. Legal codes. Water networks spanning hundreds of kilometers. And a language that linguists still cannot connect to any other language on Earth, living or dead. The Ubaid didn't evolve into the Sumerians. The Sumerians replaced them, and nobody can explain how. When Sir Leonard Woolley excavated the royal tombs at Ur in the 1920s, he expected to find evidence of slow cultural growth, the gradual progress you see everywhere else in the ancient world. Instead, he found the opposite. The earliest Sumerian layers showed the same level of sophistication as the later ones. The gold work, the lapis lazuli imported from Afghanistan, the carnelian beads from the Indus Valley, all of it was there from the beginning. Woolley called it the most puzzling problem in Mesopotamian archaeology. A century later, it still is. In 2016, a team led by Iosif Lazaridis at Harvard's Department of Human Evolutionary Biology published a landmark study in Nature. They sequenced genomes from over 40 ancient individuals spanning 12,000 years of human history in the Near East. Most results made perfect sense. Anatolians connected to European farmers, Levantine populations connected to North African groups, Iranian plateau populations connected to South Asian civilizations. The genetic map of the ancient world lined up except in one place. The samples from early Sumerian burial sites showed a genetic profile that didn't group with any nearby population. Not the Akkadians to the north, not the Elamites to the east, not the early Arabian populations to the south. Lazaridis' team flagged the anomaly, but didn't speculate. In academic genetics, you report the data. You don't explain what you can't explain, but other researchers noticed. In 2019, The Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology in the same city where the Sumerian problem was first named, published a follow-up study. Ancient DNA from Mesopotamia is notoriously difficult to work with. The region's hot, humid climate breaks down genetic material faster than almost anywhere else on Earth. Most samples yield less than 1% usable human DNA. The rest is bacterial contamination. The Max Planck team developed new methods to isolate and amplify even the tiniest traces of ancient human DNA from these degraded samples. What they found confirmed what Harvard had flagged. The Sumerian period samples carried a distinct genetic component that appears nowhere else in the ancient world. They ran the data through principal component analysis, the standard method for mapping genetic relationships between populations. On the resulting chart, every other ancient civilization clustered near its geographic neighbors. The Sumerians sat alone, an island of genetic data with no bridge to any known population. But here is the detail that changes everything. The genetic break wasn't gradual. In population genetics, when one group replaces or absorbs another, you see blending hybrid DNA profiles that show mixing over generations. The shift from Ubaid to Sumerian shows almost no mixing at all. One genetic profile ends, another begins. The Max Planck team described it carefully. They called it a sharp population shift. In plain language, that means the Sumerian population didn't slowly emerge from the people who were already there. They appeared. Mainstream archaeology has explanations for sharp population shifts: migration, conquest, disease wiping out an existing population followed by new settlers. But each of these leaves specific genetic signatures, and none of them match the Max Planck data. Migration produces founder effects, a narrowing of genetic diversity that points to a small group expanding into new territory. The Sumerian samples show high genetic diversity from the earliest period. Conquest leaves the genetic signature of the winning group mixed with survivors of the defeated group. The Sumerian samples show almost no Ubaid mixing at all. Disease wipeout followed by settlement needs a known source population. For the newcomers, there is none. The Sumerians themselves had an answer to this question, and they wrote it down repeatedly. The Eridu Genesis, preserved on tablet CBS 10673 at the University of Pennsylvania Museum, describes the founding of the first 5 cities. Before these cities existed, it says, humanity lived without structure, without kingship, without civilization. Then the Anunnaki came down and established Eridu as the first city on Earth. The text doesn't frame this as mythology. It reads like a city record. The Anunnaki chose the site. They laid the foundations. They named rulers. They taught the people how to farm, build, write, and count. The Sumerian king list, preserved on the weld-blundell prism in the Ashmolean Museum, takes it further. It records kings who ruled before a great flood for tens of thousands of years each. Alulim of Eridu ruled for 28,800 years. Alalgar ruled for 36,000. These are not human lifespans. Scholars who dismiss the king list as pure mythology face an uncomfortable problem. The same document shifts seamlessly into historically verified kings rulers, whose existence is confirmed by separate inscriptions, records, and archaeological evidence. The Sumerians didn't separate their mythology from their history. They recorded them in the same document, same format, same writing conventions. Either they couldn't tell the difference between myth and reality, which contradicts everything we know about their intellectual sophistication, or they were recording something they believed was equally true. The Atrahasis Epic, one of the oldest narrative texts ever discovered, describes the Anunnaki creating a worker species by mixing their own essence with the clay of the earth. The Akkadian word used is temu. which translates to blood, essence, or life force depending on context. The passage describes a specific procedure. An Anunnaki named Enki and a birth goddess named Ninhursag carried out the work. They took the blood of a sacrificed god, mixed it with clay, and from this mixture created the first humans. The text describes 14 first creations, 7 male, 7 female, grown in what the tablet calls the womb of the goddesses. For decades, this was read as pure creation mythology, Mesopotamia's version of Genesis. But the language is strangely procedural. The Atrahasis doesn't describe magic, it describes steps. Part 1. Part 2. Growth period. Result. And then it describes the first attempts as failures. Warped creations that couldn't function. Beings that lacked certain capacities. Versions that had to be discarded before the process was refined. This is not how myths typically work. Myths describe creation as an act of divine will, instant and perfect. The Atrahasis describes trial and error, repeated testing, a building process with versions and fixes. The kind of language you would use to describe engineering, not worship. And the Atrahasis isn't alone. The Enuma Elish, the Babylonian creation epic derived from earlier Sumerian sources, describes Marduk using the blood of the defeated god Kingu to create humanity. The Eridu Genesis tells the same core story from yet another angle. 3 separate written traditions spanning centuries, all describing the same process. Divine living material combined with earthly material to produce a new species. Either an entire civilization maintained a coordinated fiction across hundreds of years and multiple independent scribal schools, or they were recording something they all agreed had actually happened. In 2003, the Human Genome Project completed its mapping of human DNA. One of the most surprising discoveries was the presence of what geneticists call orphan gene stretches of human DNA that have no matching ancestral version in any other species. Every living thing shares the vast majority of its genetic code with related species through common descent. Humans share 98.7% of DNA with chimpanzees, 85% with mice, 60% with fruit flies. Standard evolutionary genetics predicts that every gene should trace back to an older version in an ancestor species. But roughly 634 human genes have no such ancestor. They appear in the human genome with no history behind them. No prior version in any primate. No degraded copy in any mammal. They exist only in humans, and they code for proteins tied to brain development, neural connections, and cognitive ability. The exact traits that separate humans from every other species on Earth. This doesn't prove the Atrahasis is literal history. That's not the claim. But it raises a question that mainstream science has not answered. Where did 634 genes come from if they didn't evolve from anything? Then there is the haplogroup data. Human populations carry genetic markers called haplogroups, inherited patterns that trace maternal and paternal lineages back tens of thousands of years. The ancient DNA pulled from Sumerian period burials carries a haplogroup distribution that doesn't match the expected profile of the region. Southern Mesopotamia should show markers aligned with the Levantine and Iranian plateau populations that surrounded it. Instead, the samples show an unusual concentration of haplogroup J2, specifically the J2A branch, at levels far higher than any nearby population from the same time period. J2A is linked to the spread of farming, but its concentration in Sumerian samples goes beyond what population genetics models predict for a farming community in that location. The numbers point to either extreme genetic drift in a small founder group, which conflicts with the high overall diversity in the samples, or a wave of people from a source population that has never been identified. The Sumerians described themselves using a term that scholars have debated for over a century: the black-headed people Sag-Gig-Ga in Sumerian. This is usually read as a simple ethnic label, but in context, it functions as a marking term. They used it to distinguish themselves from other populations in the region. Not a cultural distinction, a biological one. They saw themselves as fundamentally different from the people around them, and they were specific about what made them different. The Sumerians described the Anunnaki as having given them the seed of mankind, a phrase that appears across multiple tablets and time periods. The Sumerian term, Numun Nam Lulu, points to biological origin, not cultural transmission. When they talked about receiving the me, the fundamental building blocks of civilization, they used entirely different language. Knowledge was given, but their physical existence was created. Two separate acts, two separate word choices, maintained consistently across centuries by scribes who were meticulous enough to preserve the distinction. And here is what makes all of this impossible to dismiss. At every major Sumerian site, Eridu, Ur, Uruk, Lagash, the earliest layers show the same pattern: no growth phase, no clumsy first attempts at writing that gradually improve, no small temples that slowly evolve into ziggurats over centuries. Eridu's Temple 1, the earliest structure at the site, already follows architectural rules that would define Mesopotamian sacred buildings for the next 3,000 years. The alignment is precise. The proportions are planned. The foundation offerings include materials imported from thousands of kilometers away. Compare this to Egypt. The path from simple mastaba tombs to the Step Pyramid to the Great Pyramid spans 400 years of visible trial and error. You can trace the building knowledge growing in real time across multiple sites and generations. That is how civilizations develop. The Sumerians skipped it entirely. There are safe explanations for each of these findings taken individually. Sample degradation, random noise. Gaps in the reference databases that will close more ancient DNA is tested. All real possibilities. But taken together, the pattern points to something specific. It points to what the Sumerians themselves wrote on clay tablets 5,000 years ago and stored in temple vaults, texts we have been reading for over a century without taking at face value. The oldest civilization in human history appeared with no detectable origin. Their language has no relatives. Their genetics have no ancestors. Their technology appeared fully formed. And they left behind thousands of documents explaining exactly where they came from and how they got here. We translated those documents, we cataloged them, we put them in museums, and then we filed them under mythology and moved on. In 2018, a genetics team compared Sumerian DNA to every known civilization on Earth and found nothing. No match, no connection, no parent population. The Sumerians remain exactly what they always said they were, something that appeared on this planet, fully formed. With knowledge they didn't develop and a genetic signature that belongs to nobody else. The question isn't whether the data is real. It is. The question is whether we are willing to follow it, where it leads. Maybe the oldest civilization in human history has been telling us something about ourselves all along, and we just weren't ready to listen.